Hello there, my beautiful internet friends. Welcome back to Trauma Talk. I am Jo. This morning I woke up and I fed my dogs and I let them outside. I grabbed some coffee and then I came inside and I pulled up a YouTube video to watch while I drank my coffee. And it just so happened that this video popped up. It's by Jubilee and it's called "Has the Me Too Movement Gone Too Far?" This is a topic I've covered on this channel before. I've covered it on my other channel. It's something I really care about. And I wanted to talk about a few specific things that they bring up in this video. So as a little bit of background, the Me Too movement started back it gained a lot of traction back in 2016, 2017, and it's been going ever since. And when it started, as a survivor of sexual assault, I was really excited to see that happening. I was really excited to see this conversation being had in maybe a slightly more positive way and people coming forward and speaking out and telling their stories, because that can be so healing. And I was psyched about it, to be honest with you. For a very long time, the narrative has been, if you are assaulted or abused or something happens to you, that it's your fault. I've experienced a lot of victim blaming. I see it all the time. Pull up any comment section of any video that deals with an accusation and you'll see exactly what I mean. And so it was really validating to start seeing the public sentiment actually starting to have a conversation about this instead of just going off of assumptions and victim blaming and guilt. But as happens with any movement, there are pieces of it that I don't particularly agree with. So this video by Jubilee, who I love, by the way, Jubilee brings together people who disagree and has them have conversations. And I think it's great to see two sides or more of any particular issue. But they brought together 3 people who think the Me Too movement has gone too far and 3 people who do not think that it's gone too far. And ironically, when I started watching this, I was like, I know who 2 of these people are, Blair White and Sydney, I think it's Watson. I may be wrong there. Both of them are YouTubers. Both of them are very outspoken. They're both kind of abrasive in how they present their arguments. I've watched both of their channels. I agree with some things. I don't agree with other things. But there are a few things that were brought up that I think are important to address. One of the biggest things is that it does not weaken your argument to consider someone else's position. There were a couple times where one side completely shut down the other side. For instance, this moment.
All she needs to say is, he sexually assaulted me, he did something, and then it's he said, she said, and I lose my job, I lose my income, I can no longer support my boys.
That does not happen.
It absolutely happens.
It does not happen.
It happens every single day.
No, that doesn't happen. And then she goes and corrects herself and makes it seem like, okay, maybe it's possible, but it doesn't really happen. The reality is that false accusations do occur. It is heartbreaking and horrible and inexcusable, but they do happen. And those who make false accusations against people damage this movement, they damage the reputation of their survivors, they damage everything. And most of all, they damage the person they are falsely accusing. That's a horrendous thing to do. It doesn't happen often. It does not happen often, but it does occur. It's not wrong, and it doesn't weaken what you're saying to admit, yeah, sometimes that does happen, but let's talk about the bigger issue. Let's talk about it in the context of, everything else, in the context of the data that we have. So often when we're having conversations with people we disagree with, I think it's easy to sort of back ourselves into a corner and just start standing so aggressively on what you think and what you believe that you aren't willing to consider anything from someone who disagrees with you. And I think that's really not a great place to be in.
I think that a lot of times when you see hashtags like "believe all women," "believe women," and there's no nuance, and that just has to be the case.
The hashtag "believe all women" is something that I really struggle with. For starters, because it doesn't include other genders. It doesn't include men or people who identify as something else, which I think is a problem because abuse is not gendered, like I've talked about before on this channel. Secondly, I think you're bound to have problems when you're asking everyone to simply believe people without context. Context is really important. What I believe the movement should be striving for is replacing the default position with most people being of questioning people who come forward with stories of abuse and assault, to blaming them for what they've gone through, to making excuses for perpetrators, so on and so forth. The default position can switch more towards believing someone, taking them at their word, and then looking into it. I don't think it's ever healthy to suggest that society believes anyone who comes forward with any accusations. That's not how our government is set up. That's not how our justice system is set up. And also, it's an unreasonable goal. It's important when you're talking about serious crimes that you look into it. But so often, it doesn't start with any belief. I've experienced this myself. People don't want to take you seriously. People don't want to think that people can do really, really horrible things. So we write it off, we make excuses, and we try to move on. And that leaves victims and survivors with a lot more pain than they're in already.
I believe that the Me Too movement has swung way too far, and a lot of men that I know are deeply concerned about, and I refer to the Harvard Business Review study that just came out 3 months ago that suggested that 58% of men are deeply concerned about being falsely accused.
A lot of these sorts of arguments of like men being really afraid to exist in the workplace or to ever be alone with a woman, I hear those arguments made fun of, but I understand where they're coming from. If I was a guy and I heard stories of someone being falsely accused and what happened to their life and what people thought of them, I would be scared of that even if I had never done anything wrong. I don't think fear indicates guilt. Oftentimes the argument that I hear from the other side, from the more pro-MeToo movement part of things, is, oh, men are scared that someone's gonna falsely accuse them, boo-hoo. Women are afraid that they're gonna get assaulted. And again, that's a very gendered statement to make, and I dislike that, but just taking it at its face value. Just because someone's afraid of one thing doesn't cancel out someone else's fear. I get being scared of false accusations. I get that that would be frightening. I get that that's probably difficult to navigate. I've had conversations with male friends where they've talked about it being a difficult thing to navigate, not knowing what's too far. And the cynical part of me is like, dude, just don't ever do anything that crosses someone's boundaries and you'll be fine. But the reality is that there is more nuance to things. People need to understand what consent is and isn't, and we don't do a great job of teaching that. And I think it's important that we talk about gray areas or what appear to be gray areas and what to do in those situations and have not biased, healthy, educational conversations about how to treat each other, about how to initiate contact with someone, about how to be respectful and what that looks like. That's the only way we're ever gonna move forward. That's the only way we're gonna progress, and that maybe things like this will happen at a lower rate.
The lines between harassment, assault, and rape are being blurred.
So if you're in the workplace and somebody puts their hand on your waist and it's unwanted and you go to human resources, the person who did that could be accused of sexual assault. Now, if you get any man on the street or any man or woman on the street and say to them, so-and-so was convicted of sexual assault, in that person's mind, that's the same as rape.
In the video, they bring up this idea of everything being lumped into one category, that rape and someone putting their hand on your back in a way that makes you uncomfortable are not the same thing and shouldn't be called the same thing. And I totally agree with that. I think we saw this sort of happen in the media when a lot of celebrities were being accused of things. Someone who repeatedly assaulted women was put in the same category with someone who was inappropriate in word choice. Those two things are not the same, but I don't think that saying that detracts from the harm of either. Someone verbally harassing you, someone touching you in any way that is violating or uncomfortable or shouldn't happen, those are horrible things. Regardless, they have an effect on you. They have more of an effect on you than most people would think. Something that I personally think is really important to remember and emphasize here is that just because, let's say someone was sexually assaulted by someone they don't know in an alleyway, that's sort of like the stereotypical what happens when that happens to someone story. Then let's say there's someone else who was on an airplane and some guy tried to feel them up. Those two things are not the same thing. That doesn't mean that both people aren't very affected by it. Something that I learned very early on when it came to trauma in general is that the act itself, whatever has occurred, is no indication of the impact that it's going to have on someone necessarily. I know people who have been sexually assaulted like I have, and it's a small thing in their lives compared to other things that they've experienced, where to me, I've lost my leg, I've experienced a lot of different things, and nothing comes close to that experience and what came after. When we're having this conversation, it's important not to write people off just because what they went through wasn't as bad as someone else, because you have no way of knowing that. You have no way of knowing the impact that it has on someone, and it's really important to listen to what someone is saying, to listen about the effect that it had on someone, regardless of what it is. But yes, it is important to have those distinctions and not lump them all into one category.
But here we are, me too, and here I am dealing with nuance.
But I think
and so
you're
when you
an
sit here and
anomaly.
say that nuance is it's not here, it's not a part of the conversation, you're erasing me.
I think you're actually an anomaly in a lot of this, because when you talk to a lot of people about this topic, you get this very overarching, one way is the highway perspective.
If there was ever a topic that did need nuance and conversation, I think it is this one. I don't think it's a great idea to put broad labels on things. I think we lack a lot of understanding when we do that. I think we lose a lot of people when we do that. I think we start losing in general. When we make labeled and overarching statements instead of having conversations and looking at the nuance and the details of things. One example of this that I am intending to do a video on in depth in the future is people within movements turning on each other because they don't They don't say the right things. I have experienced this with people who I know. One made a statement in regards to something about the Me Too movement, and the other suggested that maybe that wasn't entirely accurate. And once she suggested that maybe that wasn't entirely accurate, the girl who made the post turned on her, called her not an ally, called her blaming victims, which she didn't even suggest, and unfriended her, like completely wrote off her existence and said that she wasn't an ally for the movement anymore because she suggested something that wasn't 100% in line with the party line, that wasn't 100% in line with what this person who posted it was thinking. And that's really heartbreaking to me. We're just gonna lose everybody if we act that way. A really heartbreaking moment for this video is at the end when they ask who has been personally affected by sexual assault or anything under the hashtag of Me Too, and 4 of the people come forward. And it was so interesting to me that when they were talking about this, when they were sharing their stories, they were all very respectful. They weren't pointing fingers, they weren't anything. They were just listening to each other, and I thought that that was a beautiful and also very hard moment. So all in all, I would really recommend that you watch this video. I think it brings up important points. I think it makes you think. People get a little bit upset. People make some broad overarching statements, which isn't the best, but hey, that's how people work sometimes. That's how conversation goes. So like I said, the video is linked down below. Also check out the rest of the videos that Jubilee have. They're kind of interesting. I'm really grateful for the Me Too movement. I do think that the pendulum has swung far to one side. I think there are some serious dangers there, and I think we need to be careful. We need to have conversations. We need to talk to each other and continue this conversation instead of just getting mad at people and vilifying anyone who seems to disagree. So far, we were over here where victims were only blamed, and that was pretty much how it worked, and made fun of, and they were just like the butt of jokes. And now things have swung far to the other side where there are also encompassing overarching statements being made that are also not helpful, like false accusations don't occur. Well, they do occur, and it's okay to say that. It doesn't take away from the validity of your argument to say that. I hope that the pendulum will kind of swing back to the middle where we can have conversations, where people can talk about what they've gone through, where justice can be found in an easier way, because right now it's agonizing. If you've gone through something and you go to the police, it is so traumatizing to go through that system. I'm speaking from personal experience. That absolutely needs reform. That needs to be changed and improved. But I hope in all of this we cannot write off the other side who disagrees with us. Thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate it. I want to talk about this on this channel because I talk about trauma, and the Me Too movement is all about trauma. Thanks for your time and spending a few minutes out of your day here with me. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would hope that you're respectful to one another in the comment section down below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. I love you guys. I'm thinking about you, and I'll see you soon. Bye, guys.